The occupation by the Moors for 700 years greatly influenced the culture and cuisine of Spain. The Moors brought with them citrus fruits, nuts and spices, and introduced the cultivation of rice. By the 15th century, the Christians had expelled the Muslim Moors, and Spain began its conquest of the New World, where it discovered exciting new gastronomic treasures, peppers, chocolate, and tomatoes. My journey begins in Barcelona, the capital of the Catalan region and one of my favorite cities in the world. It's a sophisticated and cultured city, rich in history and architecture. Apart from Manuel and Barcelona Football Club, the other immediate image of Barcelona is this magnificent Gaudi Cathedral. It's a classic piece of Mañana Spanish architecture, a subtle blend of neo-Gothic and Art Deco. And I say Mañana because the original schedule was for 10 to 15 years. Well, over 100 years later, they're still constructing it. Antoni Gaudi was 30 years old when, in 1884, he accepted the commission to build the Sagrada Familia, which is now the most famous and striking landmark in Barcelona. He obsessively worked on the project for over 30 years, until his death in 1926. He was run over by a tram. La Boqueria is a superb market, packed with fresh vegetables and fruits, meat and cured hams, and a fantastic selection of fish and shellfish. Just my sort of place. The good thing about the Mediterranean is there's no elitism in fish. Everybody eats every kind of fish, from the humble squid to the mighty tuna. And it's also why the Mediterranean people live so well, live so long, suffer from many less heart attacks than we do in Northern Europe, because of the fish, the olive oil, the vegetables, and of course, good slurps of wine from time to time. Although, some of the sizes of some of these fish might shock some governments, but if the Spanish government tried to interfere with the Spanish housewives fishing, the government would fall, notwithstanding little tiny fish like that. Well, it's mid-morning and time for a snack. As a committed food historian who will listen to any old waiter or any old wino for a bit of information, I'm told that probably the first ever tapa was simply a crust of bread. In the days when cafes didn't have smart stainless steel cabinets, refrigeration and air conditioning and stuff like that, the worker coming in for a drink after a hard day in the fields would find his glass of wine infested with flies and mosquitoes. So the innkeeper would give them a piece of bread to keep the flies out. And of course, sitting there idly and chatting about the harvest and stuff, they'd begin to dip it into their wine and eat it. Over time, over centuries, this has developed into a selection of small portions of little edible things. First of all, let me explain, these little dishes are not hors d'oeuvre. The trencherman Spaniard will eat this after having stopped about 10 o'clock in the morning for some sweet donuts and milky coffee. Around about 12, he'll sneak out of his office and have a little tapa and a glass of sherry or a glass of wine. And then 2 o'clock, he'll go for a proper lunch. Anyway, I've just got about 6 or 7 here. This one is salt cod in tomato sauce, and it's highly delicious, bacalao. Almecas, which are, of course, cockles by another name, cooked in parsley and white wine, garlic. And one of my all-time favourites are bocarones. Now, these are small fish, very often anchovies. They fillet them, and they're raw, and they just marinate them in lemon juice and olive oil. Very Japanesey, in fact. And then here, little sausages stuffed into a potato. Hey, this is really good fun. With garlic mayonnaise. And probably the nearest thing we ever get in England to a tapa, some properly made, thoroughly cholesterol fat pork scratchings. Nearly time for lunch. Tucked away in one of Barcelona's narrow streets is perhaps the city's most famous restaurant, Los Caracoles, the Snails, which has been run by 5 generations of the Boqueria family. This is a kitchen which truly deserves that famous cliche, if you can't stand the heat, then get out of the kitchen. Since 1835, Los Caracoles, the Snails, has been running a restaurant here in Barcelona. even to this day, they have the coal-fired stoves. It's an incredible place. However, cooking is what we're going to do today. Is what we're all about anyway, I suppose. Partridges. So I'm going to saute these partridges in some olive oil and then cook them in quite a curious way. In fact, I'm going to cook them in vinegar. And things have been cooked in vinegar since the Roman times, probably because the Roman wine was so dreadful it turned into vinegar. Anyway, we chuck the partridges into here, olive oil, and let them brown, and that'll take a few minutes. So while that's happening, I'm going to stuff some peppers. And I'm going to stuff them with this stuff, which is salted cod. It's called bacalao. Big fillets of cod drenched in salt for several days, then allowed to dry. Now, to prepare this, you need to soak it in water overnight. That's what you do. Then you cut it up in little pieces and cook it in milk. When it's cooked, you put it into a bowl and you blend it with a hand blender till it's a smooth puree, all the while dripping in olive oil and some crushed garlic. Then, excuse me, Steve, you get some red peppers. Now, you can take a fresh red pepper and roast it completely dry in the oven, peel the skin off, and it looks like this. And you just stuff, which is quite a messy little complicated business to do. You stuff each pepper with the puree of bacalao. A little drop of olive oil over those, and we whack them into the oven. To finish off this dish, I've fried some garlic, added pureed red peppers, seasoned with paprika, and finally some cream to make a delicious sauce. Now, here are the partridges. Good, they're beautifully browned. One thing I forgot, when I was chatting about Barcelona at some time in this program, I've got some news for those of you who hate blood sports. You'll be delighted to know that in Catalonia, which is the province of which Barcelona is the capital, there is no bullfighting. It's banned. Right, then I add the onions and let them cook away for about 2 or 3 minutes before you add the next thing, which is some carrots. Little raw carrots cut up nicely. And just soften them in the olive oil. Then we add some celery. I'll add some garlic. And some sherry vinegar, please. Sherry vinegar. Thank you, and some white wine vinegar. And finally, some asparagus, the little red chilies, and then we let that magic concoction simmer away for about 30 or 40 minutes, and at the very last moment, we'll add some spring onions just on the top so they steam through with the vapor that's coming off the vinegar. And of course, in an ideal world, there'll be a lid on that so it simmers away for about 30 to 40 minutes. Brilliant, isn't it? Religion has had a profound effect on our eating habits. In the 8th century, when the Moors, who were Muslims, invaded Spain, they brought with them aubergines, spices, and oranges, and an advanced system of agriculture, hitherto unknown in Spain. But in the 15th century, when the Moors were expelled, and the zealot Christians were really worried there might be still some people masquerading as Christians around the place, they devised a really wicked tool for ethnic cleansing, and it was called pork. They would cajole or con or connive to invite people to huge banquets. And if they declined to eat the pork, they knew they were Muslims. So the rack awaited them. But no, it wasn't a rack of beautifully roasted lamb. Right. Broad beans are an essential part of the Spanish diet. Indeed, before people like Christopher Columbus and everybody came back to Spain and the rest of Europe with things like potatoes and wheat and stuff, even the bread in the Middle Ages and before was made from dried broad beans. Anyway, these are little broad beans, which we've blanched in salted boiling water and then taken off the nasty outside husk. You simply tip that into your salad bowl. Okay? We mix that with some finely chopped, shredded lettuce, nice hearty cos lettuce or Manoff lettuce, something of that kind. Then we add some chopped mint. like that. Then we add some very finely chopped serrano ham, Parma ham if you like. Twiddle that all about. Add a little bit of lemon juice. Quite a bit of olive oil. And mix that nicely around, and you have a really refreshing, crunchy, and terribly healthy broad bean salad. A splendid dish of partridges, simmered in vinegar and served with vegetables. Peppers stuffed with cream of salted cod and served with a red pepper sauce. Finally, a salad of broad beans mixed with shredded lettuce, mint and serrano ham, a classic Catalan dish. I've travelled south to Andalucia, to Jerez, where each year the town celebrates the first harvest of grapes that will produce one of the world's most famous wines, sherry. The grapes are taken to the cathedral steps, where a great fanfare and celebration awaits. Jerez was shipping wine to Rome 2,000 years ago, and records show shipments to England as far back as 1482. But it wasn't until the 18th century that merchants, most of them British, made sherry the world's most widely distributed wine. In Spain, it is revered. It's drunk chilled as an aperitif or with tapas, and can vary from a pale dry fino, the darker coloured olorosas, and of course the dark, sweet cream sherry, famous for weddings and funerals. The González Buyers Bodega has a cellar full of maturing sherry, and special guests are invited to sign a barrel. How could I refuse? This is really rather splendid. I've been placed above Winston Churchill, slightly to the right of Margaret Thatcher, which I always have been, by the way, and next to the ex-president of Colombia. Quite my kind of people, really. And they all love, as I do, sherry, of course. But will they melt me down like they do in Madame Tussauds, or rub me off and replace my name with David Beckham? Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you. Now, let's do the real thing.
Superb. Meanwhile, the chaps are still hard at work. Their boots, no doubt, adding a distinctive colour and flavour. This first pressing is blessed, and the extracted juice is stored in huge sherry casks that are finally paraded through the town. And so ends a ceremony that still takes place and has been taking place for hundreds of years. Well, after my aperitif, I'm ready for a spot of lunch. And I've heard very good reports of a restaurant called El Faro, the lighthouse, de El Puerto. So I thought I'd check it out. The chef, Fernando Cordoba, sets to work preparing some of the specialities of the house. I'm looking forward to this. Wow. So, I have got some toast with ratatouille and salted anchovies on top. So I'll start with a little bit of that. This is the really difficult part of my job. That is quite delightful. There's crunchy country bread, toasted, clearly drizzled with olive oil. Then there's a very fresh green pepper kind of ratatouille, stewed green peppers with a little bit of tomato and some anchovies on top. And it's very green and very yellow. Very much the colours of Andalucia. That, I think, is sensational. Then here, a tiny little squid with some couscous, courgettes, and saffron sauce, and stuffed with couscous and finely minced meat. And very lightly fried courgettes, which have been allowed to get cold, and it's nice, it's really nice. Well, if that's the beginning, this is good. I have to say, this is one of the nicest beginnings of a meal I've had for a very long time. Now I'll have a drink. I'll have some Baronia, and a red one. Muchas gracias. Ah, a little fillet of veal with some little blinis and some fried shallots again. Ah, this has been poached, not grilled as you might have thought. So I would think the origins of this dish, which clearly have been refined, would be from a rough, tough cowboys' country beef stew. I mean, what do they do with the bulls when they've killed them? And around here they grow thousands of them. So this is a refinement of very, very tender meat with little blinis. Now, in fact, I tell you something else. It isn't even beef at all. It's tongue. It is beef tongue. And it's absolutely exquisite. I do like these simple, real meals. Yes, it's presented in a modern fashion, and that's pretty to look at, but the taste is really there. That's got 100-year-old taste in that. The wine is powerful and oaky, soft, great in this cool room. This, if I'm getting the sort of food that the customers get here, this restaurant in the Puerta de Santa Maria, just down the road from Jerez, which is called El Faro, the lighthouse, has actually produced for me one of the best meals I've had in a couple of years. And if you do roll up here, you can quote me on that. And I'm sure if you don't get what I get, they'll put it right for you. Beautiful. The Royal Andalusian School of Equestrian Art is another must when you're in Jerez. These purebred Spanish horses are so elegant as they perform a sort of equestrian ballet. I asked Rafael Soto Andrade, director of the training at the school, how long it takes to train both horse and rider.
Well, I think the rider takes longer than the horse. We are not so clever like horses. Horse who arrive here with 3.5 years, nearly 4 years old, it doesn't go into the show not before 3 years minimum of training. It's a very nice and the best horse you can ever ride for dressage. In the rider, the best thing of a rider is the patience and sensibility to understand the horse. We have to think that this horse has also the character and the temperament of us, you know. He's brave and he has a lot of charm, you know, but at the same time he's very noble. He has given this quality for centuries and centuries.
My next dish also has a long history. There are lots of different rice dishes cooked in Spain, and they're either called arroz, rice with something, or they're called a paella. Now, a paella is not actually a dish. A paella is a metal pan. Anything that's cooked in one of those is called a paella, but it's basically for cooking rice. If you lived in the country, you might add rabbit and vegetables to it. If you lived on the shore, on the coast, you'd probably add fish to it. So that's what a paella is. To make one, my way, you have this huge pan and put in quite a lot of good olive oil. Then, because I'm using chicken, we add some bits of chicken. Oh, set fire to myself. Just brown those off for a second or two. While they're browning, we can add some onions. And we can add some garlic. Now, the next important thing is the rice. Short grain rice, which has been soaked and washed several times to get rid of the starch and then carefully drained. It was soaked for about 4 hours. And it's important now to turn all of this round so that the rice gets a good coating of olive oil. Then we're going to put in some tomatoes, chopped up pieces of tomato. Then some fish stock. I mean, I have access to lots of cheap fish here, so I did boil up some fish heads, but it's perfectly okay to use some packet fish stock. Then we put in the most expensive bit of all, which is the saffron. And as the rice begins to become cooked and the liquid is absorbed and the chicken is cooked, then we're going to add loads and loads of shellfish. In the meantime, compromise with this lid, put that on there like that. And in 20 minutes or so, now we can add some little clams. Some mussels. And one of the great specialities around here, these little tiny clams which are called almecas, and very often they're just cooked in tapas bars, quite simply, on the plancha like that, with that over them, and they serve you those as a little tapa, which we'll have in a moment or two. That's enough of those. Then we'll add some green peas. We might add a little salt at this stage. It doesn't really require very much because the fish themselves are quite salty. And then the old lid goes back on again. It's ready when the clams and the mussels have opened, and the paella tastes as good as it looked. You might like to know that a book of my Mediterranean adventures, packed with 60 recipes, accompanies this series. And you can visit the Channel 5 website for more about food, wine, and me.